Tēnā koutou and tēnā koe, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Genevieve Toop and I'm submitting on behalf of Greenpeace Aotearoa in opposition to the Overseas Investment Amendment Bill. To begin, however, according to the Register of Financial Interests for MPs, many of the members of this select committee are landlords. And as landlords, you'll know it's standard to check the references of a prospective tenant. You call their previous landlord to check they didn't trash the place or leave behind thousands in unpaid rent. I think we could all agree these basic background checks are pretty reasonable. So, is it reasonable, Mr. Chair, that the government would stop doing even basic background checks on foreign corporations wanting to buy up Aotearoa New Zealand's most sensitive land? Clause 8 of this bill says that if a foreign corporation wants to buy an offshore island, conservation land, a lakebed, or a wāhi tapu site, the government no longer needs to check whether that buyer has committed serious crimes in other jurisdictions, such as breaking environmental or labour laws, or evading paying their taxes. And even if a check is done, and it reveals the prospective buyer is in fact a corporate cowboy, this bill makes it far harder for the government to decline the sale unless there's a national security risk. To be clear, the sensitive land that the Act Party wants to strip these safeguards from is outlined in Schedule 1 of the current Act. It includes the conservation estate, offshore islands, lakebeds, the marine and coastal zone, wāhi tapu and other culturally significant sites, and the land adjoining these areas. This land represents Aotearoa New Zealand's most irreplaceable cultural and natural heritage. This bill also removes the benefit to New Zealand test for this sensitive land, a test that simply requires foreign investment to demonstrate clear benefits to New Zealand and allows the government to impose the bare minimum of conditions on the sale, like environmental protection, heritage preservation, and ongoing public access. Requiring that public access is maintained across private land, even after it moves into foreign ownership, is critical. Much of our conservation estate is landlocked by private land. So without this protection, we could see hunters, fishers, trampers, mana whenua, and even conservation workers cut off from accessing the public conservation estate. While foreign billionaires may come and buy up land in New Zealand to create their own private billionaire bolt holes, that should not come at the cost of the public being able to access public land. David Seymour wants to remove all these basic protections through Clause 8. Why? Because much like Clause 8 in another one of David's unpopular bills, this is not evidence-based policy, it is ideology. Act Party ideology, where all sale of New Zealand to multinational corporations, all foreign investment is seen as good, no matter how little benefit it truly brings to New Zealand, nor how great the environmental or cultural cost. This flawed ideology also rears its head in Clause 9 through 11 of this bill, which removes the special benefit test for foreign investments in forestry. According to the Treasury, up to 70% of New Zealand's plantation forestry is already foreign owned. And the ministerial inquiry into forestry slash and erosion after Cyclone Gabrielle found the forestry industry caused immense damage. Lives and livelihoods were put at risk. Infrastructure was destroyed. People were left traumatised. It is against this backdrop of severe underregulation of this industry that ACT is proposing further deregulation. Let's take a closer look at some of these offshore forestry companies. And while we're doing that, I'd like you all, members of the committee, to try and recall some of the devastating scenes of Cyclone Gabrielle. In 2019, the single biggest landowner in New Zealand was Taumata Plantations Limited. Despite that name, That company in 2019 was actually owned by several overseas investment banks and funds. The largest shareholder was a Canadian insurance company. In fact, in 2019, 5 out of the 10 largest landowners in New Zealand were offshore forestry companies. Coming in at number 4 was Matariki Forests. Again, despite that name, in 2019 it was in fact 3/4 owned by a US-based company. And coming in at number 8, a much more aptly named company called Global Forest Partners LLC. Global Forest Partners is registered in the Cayman Islands. Now, what is it that the Cayman Islands is so famous for? Is it these golden sand beaches, or is it something else? I wonder if the CEOs or offshore shareholders of these multinational forestry firms were the ones whose homes were wrecked by forestry slash after Cyclone Gabrielle. I wonder if they paid their fair share to rebuild the bridges and roads destroyed by their industry, or were they instead, metaphorically or literally, bathing in the Cayman Islands' warm, tax-free waters while New Zealand taxpayers footed the cleanup bill? It is simply not reasonable for you to pass a bill that says offshore forestry investments, which have brought such demonstrable harm to this country, will receive less scrutiny and have fewer conditions imposed on them. To David Seymour's Overseas Investment Bill, we say no. If the New Zealand First member of this committee had shown up, he might recall that sign. Or perhaps it's been forgotten, as New Zealand First does seem to have forgotten a few things lately, like what it is they purportedly stand for. This Act Party bill literally removes the benefit to New Zealand test so that it's easier to sell New Zealand off to multinational corporations. You'll have to forgive me for failing to see how that, by any stretch of the imagination, puts New Zealand first. But if New Zealand First does bend the knee to another of ACT's ideological policies, then so be it. The voters' cards will fall as they may, and they may very well fall under 5%, but that will be the bid that New Zealand First makes for itself by signing up to a bill that would see New Zealand be sold off to the highest bidding foreign corporation. And as for the government allowing just 5 hours of oral submissions on this bill, it is undemocratic, but it is not surprising, especially from a government who recently engaged in voter suppression. And if you add to that the new FBI office opening up in our capital city, you'd be forgiven for thinking you hadn't woken up in Aotearoa today, you'd woken up in Trump's America. But this is still Aotearoa, a nation with a long and proud tradition of peaceful protest. So here's a recommendation for any foreign corporation thinking they might be able to use this new law change to exploit Aotearoa. Maybe run a background check of your own. Maybe ask for references from Statoil, Anadarko, Chevron, or Petrobras. All foreign oil giants kicked out of New Zealand's waters one by its people. By brave sailors from Te Whānau Apanui, by students who shut down oil conferences, by everyday New Zealanders who protested their presence at every turn for over a decade. These new prospective profiteering corporates might find these oil companies have a cautionary tale to tell about trying to come down here to exploit this country against the will of its people. In closing, to the Select Committee, and especially to the New Zealand First member who didn't show up, if you truly have the best interests of New Zealanders at heart, then you must reject this bill. It does not protect New Zealanders' interests. It does not protect the country's most priceless and valuable areas. These areas are what makes Aotearoa special. So don't put them up for sale. Protect them so that your kids and all future New Zealanders can experience them. And while I could leave it there on that inspirational note, I have to add, is it really too much to ask that this government starts governing for New Zealanders instead of governing in service of foreign corporations and their offshore shareholders? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Genevieve. I will rest assured, this subcommittee, New Zealand First, was on yesterday's subcommittee, but as a courtesy, I will be telling the member from New Zealand First to go to your clip at 10:05 and listen to what you've got to say. So I will pass that message on, no problem. We're out of time, but if members had a quick question, then I'm happy to do that in the generosity of spirit. Well, you've left no stone unturned, clearly, Ms. Toop, so thank you for your loud and clear advocacy. As I said, we will make sure New Zealand First has the opportunity to hear your presentation.
Thank you.